The Taliban used to have this saying to the Americans that you have the fancy watches, but I have the time.
Great to be here at the Asia Society event, and in the presence of some very fine minds. They've already been introduced. Dr. C. Raja Mohan is a strategic affairs guru, if I may use that word, has covered the area for decades now. Navdeep Suri is one of our most distinguished diplomats and has tracked the region very carefully, particularly since he's served in it. And Neelkanth Mishra is now a Mumbaikar and chief economist at Axis Bank. So, Ghar ki Murgi. Not Dal Barabar, but essentially someone who will give us a sense of the geoeconomic impact of what's happened in West Asia. Many years ago, Harold Wilson, the British Prime Minister, said a week is a long time in politics. He got it terribly wrong because Donald Trump has shown that a few hours can be enough. Every evening at about 6 p.m. Indian Standard Time, Donald Trump wakes up on the East Coast and we don't know what happens for the next few hours. And we still don't know what will happen come tomorrow morning, with the wide expectation that there'll be a second round of talks ahead of a deadline that closes at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as Mr. Trump has very clearly reminded the world. So I'm going to start with that this weaponization of uncertainty, what it's doing to the world, Raja, and why. I mean, we still don't know whether the ceasefire will actually be extended tomorrow. Will Donald Trump, as he threatened to do, go ahead and bomb Iran once again? What's your sense? Are we any closer to a resolution to this conflict that's gone on for 6 weeks?
No, I would say, on the face of it, there is a deal to be made. In fact, if you see after the last round, J.D. Vance goes back, Vice President Vance says Trump doesn't want to do small deals, he wants to do a big deal. So what they're actually talking about is, in fact, the only people who say we want to make Iran great again is Mr. Trump and J.D. Vance. So what, of course, in the process, Americans will get the oil. I mean, that's a different story. But essentially, they're saying we want to cut a deal which would, if Iran makes significant substantive nuclear concessions and a couple of other things, we want to reintegrate Iran into the mainstream of the world, which means no other country has been sanctioned so much. So he's saying, look, you'll have a great time, give up the wretched nuclear stuff, we can be buddies, we can be friends, in a way go back to where US and Iran were before the Islamic Revolution took place in 79. So there is a deal to be made. I mean, we can explain the structure of it. But the problem is, for Iran, as somebody said in Iran, the old man has not been buried yet. I mean, talking about Khamenei. But the Iranian leaders are already shaking hands with the killers of the old man. So when you negotiate, even in our case, when you even talk to Pakistan, the internal arguments get furious. Here, when 47 years of enmity, and you want to talk after 40 days of vicious bombing, after years of sanctions, the system is divided, I think. So Iran's elite, Iran's political class is divided of how do you deal with this situation. And I think that's where how they come to an internal settlement, even as they negotiate with Trump, that's where most of the problems are.
Mr. Suri, should I give you the tough task of trying to unravel and decode Donald Trump's mind? Dr. Raja Mohan seems to suggest that Trump and Vance want a deal, and the Iranians are unsure of how far to go. Do you believe that we are closer in that sense to a potential deal which will ensure a temporary peace, if not a lasting one?
You know, to start with, I resent the amount of my mind space that Trump occupies. You know, it's like somebody squatting free of charge in your head and not paying rent for it. So, you know, it's something that we have to deal with every day. But look, on a more serious note, I think there's a heck of a lot of work to be done to really come to a finite, definitive sort of agreement. The best that you can expect out of conversations that may take place in Islamabad tomorrow morning is a broad framework of principles with a lot of detail yet to be tied up. And you know, what Raja said, I think if we go back to the negotiations that were taking place in February, and the comments that the Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi made on CBS, I think on the 26th of February, he was saying that for the first time ever, the Iranians have agreed to a zero stockpile. And so he was trying to say that we've already made progress that we hadn't anticipated. The Iranians have given in a lot, and so please give diplomacy a chance. And then, of course, on the 28th of February, Israel and the US bombed Iran. So I think what you're going to see today is not only an aggravated level of mistrust, but also a tougher negotiating posture from the Iranians. Americans will actually be trying to claw back to what was already on some kind of a draft paper on the 26th of February. And Trump, because he has been so vociferous about critiquing the 5+1 nuclear agreement of 2015, he's hoping that he can get something better. But I think the consensus amongst experts is you're going to get, at the end of the day, you will arrive at some point which is fairly close to that. Trump has ambitions of a grand reset in the Middle East. So does Israel. But I think Trump's framework of a grand deal with oil, etc., is very different from Israel, which wants to see a very diminished Iran, so that Iran is no longer a strategic competitor for Israel. So I think you're going to see those differing versions come into play. And so there's a lot of work yet to be done before we come to any sort of definitive agreement.
We'll come down to the specifics in a moment. Just to get you in, Neelkanth, as you watch on your TV screen or whatever else, wherever else you watch how it unfolds, I mean, from your position, looking at the economic consequences of what's been happening in West Asia, do you see this as another major supply side crisis that has been created? And what are the consequences of that? Have we even really understood the scale of the consequences, particularly if this becomes prolonged? We're not certain as to whether it'll end tomorrow, end in a week. It could take 6 months. Are we even aware, you believe, in this part of the world in particular, of the scale of the consequences of what could happen?
I think most people have an inkling. I think what the US administration has done wonderfully well is manage the markets. So by keeping them hanging, that there's a deal coming tomorrow, and so you keep greed on your side, so you're not going to sell because the markets could rebound tomorrow. But I think they also realize they're running out of time. So just to give you the arithmetic, 7% of world energy supply has been taken out because the Strait of Hormuz is closed. I mean, the first cut. And it is reasonable to say, because GDP and energy consumption are very tightly intertwined, that left untouched, it would be 7% of world GDP, which is massive. What then happens is that the East-West pipeline kicks in, the Fujairah terminal starts getting active, Kazakhstan oil comes in, the gap drops to about 10 million barrels, not 21. You then have some energy substitution. So we shut down gas-fired power plants, we start the coal-fired power plants. People in the US stop driving to the lake on the weekend because oil is very expensive. In India, for example, plastic furniture manufacturing is closed because at 50% higher plastic prices, no one wants plastic furniture. So those things start getting adjusted. But still, there is 3 to 4% of physical energy shortage, which is currently being met by inventories. So we entered the war with very high levels of inventory, 8.2 billion barrels of oil and product inventory. Oil inventory was 5.6, product inventory 2.6 billion barrels. We are now starting to reach a point. So I was talking to a commodity trader. I think in 2 to 3 weeks, bunker fuel, basically the ship oil, apparently I didn't know, Singapore is the petrol pump for ships. They're going to start running out of that. already Western airlines have stopped flying to Thailand and Vietnam because they can't get refueled there. Because the airline turbine ATF is in shortage. I think if this lasts another couple of weeks, we will start seeing airlines curtailing flight schedules. Already certain types of production has been curtailed. So we are currently, I would say, on fumes. And so if another 2-3 weeks we don't see this, I think the charade that the US administration has created that, oh, it is happening tomorrow, it's happening tomorrow, that's when the markets really panic. And perhaps that is when a true deal will happen.
Because that leads me to India's stakes, which is what I think most of us want to know. India's stakes in this West Asia war. There is an element of irony in the fact that exactly a year ago, India was going across the world after the Pahalgam terror attack, suggesting that Pakistan was a terror state and had to be exposed as such. A year later, Pakistan is mediating a conflict between Iran and the United States. Should that, Raja Mohan, worry us at all? Should that be a cause of concern that Pakistan wants to play a frontal role or has pushed itself center stage at all?
I mean, I don't think we should grudge Pakistan a little moment in the sun. That if you see the objective condition of Pakistan today, in all this great diplomatic game that they're playing, you still want $1 billion from Saudis to be rolled over. You want another $1 billion from the IMF to be rolled over. So it is not doing well economically. You see, you have an elite which has always been good at geopolitics and diplomacy. We still don't know the exact story. In fact, today FT, one of the American papers, has a story how one firm in Texas, the lobbying group, has turned it around for Pakistan. But in the end, what is Pakistan getting out of it? You can say Munir is getting something out of it, but Pakistan's economy is nowhere. It's not grown really beyond 2 to 3% in the last decade. It is today at $400 billion, 10x below you. Its per capita income is less than Bangladesh's. That is the real state of Pakistan. So I would worry about Pakistan if they start growing at 5%. Imagine 200 million people with nuclear weapons, which are reasonably experienced army. If they start growing at 5%, they'll give us a run for money. But at this point, they're only playing these games, which I think in the end, Trump is exploiting Pakistan, I would say. Roosevelt Hotel, you have in New York, nice real estate, give it to me. Oh, I believe you have some minerals somewhere, give it to me. So in a way, actually, to come back into the good books of Trump, I think Pakistan is actually trading its national assets. But then it's their sovereign choice. But I wouldn't be worried or lose sleep that Pakistan is in the limelight today.
Because interestingly, Mr. Suri, you, before our conversation began, wanted to refer to India's deep-rooted connections with this part of the world, particularly the Strait of Hormuz, and Mumbai and Surat's connections that go back centuries. Do you want to reflect upon that? Because I think that's fascinating for an audience to know that the Strait of Hormuz and Mumbai city in particular have a connection that goes back several centuries.
Yeah, and Rajdeep, it's unfortunate that many of us have forgotten the deep links that this city has had for centuries. Hormuz, as the little island from which the strait gets its name, it sits right across the tip of the strait, was a busy trading post from the 11th century onwards. There are records to show that there were wealthy Gujarati and Malabari and Sindhi communities that had settled on the island of Hormuz, and they were taking textiles and spices and everything from India. They were importing horses, they were importing Basra pearls, they were importing dates, even Chinese silks. And left their own imprint on the culture, cuisine, everything of Hormuz. In the 15th century, you had, I think, a major geopolitical moment similar to something that we are experiencing today. The Ottomans took control of Istanbul in 1453 to be exact. And with that, they took control of the trading routes across from Hormuz upwards into Central Asia, into Europe, into Africa. And once they took control, the established merchants of the time were the Genoese and the Venetian merchants. And they are deprived of that trading route to India and to China. So in the later part of the 15th century, you see this scramble. Who's going to find the sea route to India, which bypasses all of the Strait of Hormuz business, right? And the first guys to do it, Christopher Columbus tried, landed up in America. But the next guy was Vasco da Gama. He eventually makes it across the Cape of Good Hope to Calicut. 1492. And within 10 years, they are able to rapidly expand from Calicut all the way to Goa, all the way to Mumbai, Diu, and establish themselves as the colonial power controlling the sea lanes. Now, having established their stranglehold on the trade, they say, I want to make sure I've got the control on the sea lanes as well. So what do? They build a massive fort in Hormuz to say, I'm controlling the gateway for the trade. I'm running this place. And here's something interesting for Raja. They put a tax on ships going through Hormuz in 1510. And all of this is, where it comes particularly interesting is, at that time, they are running the operations out of Goa initially. Now the Brits are watching this, and they are saying, these guys are on to a cool thing because the Portuguese are making super profits out of the trade with India because they've now got a monopoly on it. How do we get in on the deal? And so 1608, one William, what's his name, Hackaway, comes, William Hawkins comes to the court of Jahangir to get a trading concession. He doesn't succeed. Then Thomas Roe comes in 1615, gets a concession. They establish themselves where? In Surat, as the first outpost. And they are very successful. And now they say, how do we get the Portuguese out of here? And so they tie up with the Shah of Iran at that time, Shah Abbas, to say, I'm going to send some navy across from Surat to help you push out the Portuguese. And they do that. And so they establish themselves in Bandar Abbas. And the next big point is 1763, and that's really significant because by the time the East India Company is strong in India, they have a governor in Bombay, and that governor decides to send a political resident to Bushehr to open his sort of consulate in Bushehr, which is going to guard the Gulf. He's given a naval squadron, which is based where? In Hormuz. And that squadron of 6 ships reports to the Navy chief in Bombay, to the governor in Bombay. And that arrangement, curiously, through which that gunboat diplomacy, they dominate the entire Gulf region. In 1822, they make the rupee, our humble Indian rupee, the legal tender for the entire area from Aden through to Basra. And that arrangement continued until 1966, until we discontinued it with the depreciation, the devaluation. But just one final point on the story is, and that will be appealing to Raja, because that 1763 naval presence of the British, reporting to Bombay, continues till 1934. In 1934, you've got this young Shah of Iran, Raza Shah Pahlavi, who is anointed, and he says, I want to establish control over my islands, including Hormuz. And so the Brits get the message, and they move to Bahrain with their navy. And they keep their presence in that little place in Bahrain till 1971, when they say, east of the Suez, we are quitting the territories. And that's the home of the US Fifth Fleet now. So we have an engagement with that region, which I think we've forgotten over the years. And it's, when we talk about our stakes in the region, I think it would do us well as we look forward to kind of spend some attention looking backward as well. Because I'm in the process of writing a book, and I've been talking to a lot of senior people in the Gulf, and they say the only big city that we knew for medical, healthcare, business, tourism was Mumbai.
You know, I just, that story is fascinating because it links the past to the present in a way. And I can understand Donald Trump perhaps not recognizing the importance of the Strait of Hormuz and forgetting the fact that a 104 square mile waterway could hold the world to ransom. Should India have known better? The reason I ask you this is there is some criticism of the fact that just a week before war broke out, we were embracing the fatherland. as Israel was described at the time. Do you believe that we needed to balance our interests more carefully in the region?
I don't think we're trying to balance. I mean, that is I think the fundamental mistake, much of the criticism of Government of India's policy, that why did he go to Israel, or why is he not supporting Iran enough? I don't think the strategy is to balance between Iran and Israel. I think a cold calculus will tell you our stakes in Israel have dramatically grown. As a technology partner, as a defense partner, increasingly as the Americans become uncertain, it becomes even more important as a strategic partner. Second, the old days when Israel versus Arab was the principal contradiction. Today, the Abraham Accords actually mean Israel is friend of UAE, is a friend of other Abraham Accord states. So the assumption in our mind about the contradiction between Arabs and Israelis, that world doesn't exist. One part of the Arab world is deeply tied to Israel in friendship because they see Iran is the problem. If you're sitting in the Arab Gulf today, the threat doesn't come from Israel. It comes from Iran, which claims Bahrain to be the 14th province. It has, occupied the islands. It says, look, I'm the natural hegemon of the Gulf. You small little fellows, you bloody well accept it. Now, Israel is not saying that to them, but we are still stuck in India with the old paradigm. And I think what the government has done in the last 14 years is systematically do two things. One, deepen ties with Israel. Two, deepen ties with UAE, and I'm sure the man who started it is sitting here. So your scale and scope of your relationship with the Gulf Arabs, $200 billion trade, 9 million people, and the scale of interest investments, that's your real world. So when they're fighting Iran, to talk about balance, I don't think it makes sense. You don't want to fight with the Iranians, but your primary interests today are with the Gulf Arabs, and the Gulf Arabs are friendly to Israel. That's what has set the stage for us.
So in a way, because the critical question when you map India's stakes is energy security. The fact that 50% of our oil comes to the Strait of Hormuz, 85% of our LNG comes from there. It's obviously required a war to wake up the system. Do you put all your eggs or all your oil in a way in the West Asian basket? How do you diversify? How do you ensure energy security? Do you believe that's one of the challenges or one of the wake-up calls that this West Asia crisis has brought home very, very strongly?
I think so. So the fact that, first, I am not of that camp that just because we got 50% of the oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz, that somehow we are more vulnerable. These are global markets. So you can track ships which crossed over from the Suez Canal, were sitting somewhere in the Mediterranean, and then they were rerouted because Indian refiners, and just to give you perspective, because India is positive on the refining side, I mean, it has surplus refining capacity, and refining margins, so oil prices have gone up by $25, $30, refining margins have gone up by $25, $30. So Indian refiners are now much, much more aggressive, and they are bidding the Europeans out of the oil market. And because they can, and so you can get the oil from anywhere. So I think the physical side, whether we should have been dependent or not, is actually a moot point. But the fact that we get 45-50% of our dense energy through imports is a huge vulnerability. No large economy in the world has become rich without controlling its own energy sources. So does this shock us? I think it does. Does this mean that it's an opportunity to push through very aggressive, politically difficult reforms? Absolutely. Do I see signs that that is starting to happen? Absolutely. So one of the biggest problems in India is that the only dense sources of energy we have can be used in the form of electricity. So we have coal, we have sunlight, we have water, that is hydel, and we have wind. But only 15% of our energy consumption is in the form of electricity. In China, that was true 20 years back. Today, they are at some 26-27%. The Japanese are at 32%. So we need to increase electrification in the economy. I think this is a very strong reason to do that, or a catalyst to do that. The second is pricing of energy. So we have the lowest price of electricity given to households and agriculture. And to compensate for that, we have very high prices of electricity given to industry and commercial. And therefore, the utilization of electricity is so bad. But look at a couple of things that have happened. The first is that you must have seen Google got a Discom license in Andhra Pradesh. Open access has been talked about for 25, 30 years, but has never happened. Meaning that a buyer, an industrial buyer, can buy electricity from whoever they want. The fact that Google, which is going to run a data center in Andhra Pradesh, can now buy electricity from wherever they want is a huge step forward. There is an Electricity Act which is going through I think in the monsoon session it may actually get presented, where I think free pricing of electricity, listing of discoms. So even like the state of Maharashtra has actually carved out the subsidy that they give to agriculture and consumers, and in a very profitable discom, they want to list it. So I think the reforms on energy distribution, all of those things have started to happen. But I think it's a 15-20 energy. And just to take 2 more minutes to add to what Raja was saying about technology. See, to get to Viksit Bharat, you need 4 things. You need a lot of dense energy. You need a lot of capital. You need a lot of technology. And you need value chain linkages. So you need to have access to supply chain partners. For technology, you have to be part of Pax Silica, so you have to be close to the US. You need to get technology from Israel. You need to get some technology from China. To get capital, of course, the Gulf is a very important source of capital. The Gulf is also a very important source of energy. And for value chain linkages, again, you have to be very close to China. So I think we have to be very clear about what our interests are and not get aligned too much on broad principles and are you standing with X, Y, or Z.
You mentioned China more than once. And one of the arguments being made is that China is actually, in a way, using Iran in some way, leveraging the depth of its economic partnership with Iran at a moment like this, and eventually could be the big beneficiary of the war. Do you go along with that there is a Chinese role, a Chinese hand, which is, as always, enigmatic and behind the scenes, which is playing some kind of a role in keeping the Iranian resilience alive?
I think there's speculation that Chinese have given them some weapons. There's speculation about intelligence are being given to attack American embassies and facilities. But I don't buy the theory at this point that China is the ultimate beneficiary. Because of their special relationship with Pakistan, they can shape the process. But I think if you're also sitting in Beijing today, you lost Venezuela, Trump takes it with a one-night operation. He's now reaching out to Iran. They pushed them out of the Latin American region. So you can say there is a counter theory which says, look, Trump is trying to capture most of the oil. China might be very good in a lot of areas. It depends on imported oil. And if the Americans begin to control the global oil market, besides their own production, restore the importance of dollar as the principal currency of the world, the challenge from China will be countered. And if you're also in Beijing, you would say, look at Americans projecting military power 10,000 miles away. If they take out the leadership of a country in the manner that they did. So it's also for them a problem. So Chinese would want to make something out of this. But I think they also see an American onslaught. For all the craziness of Trump, he's also mounted an onslaught of restoring American primacy in the international system. We can say it might not work, but I think there's a reasonable chance it might actually work.
But there are those, and you heard the Canadian Prime Minister, I saw the Canadian Consul General here, a few months ago at Davos, suggesting that the world needed, the so-called middle countries needed to come together. Even if they were not on the table, we are on the menu, and wanted to create coalitions beyond just looking at America. An increasingly unpredictable America, led by President Trump, is an opportunity to carve out partnerships beyond. So when you look at India's stakes in West Asia, this becomes an opportunity to strike bilateral partnerships outside traditional alliances. The Chinese have over the years done it reasonably successfully using their economic clout. Do you believe that India needs to be part in a way, rethink that Raja is speaking about when we look at West Asia, needs to go even beyond West Asia. The nature of our partnerships have to change. They cannot be America-centric in particular anymore.
Yeah, I think, if I can take the liberty of differing with Raja, I think he's a bit more sanguine about America's prospects vis-a-vis China's at this stage. I really think that China's playing a clever hand, and we should be concerned that when the dust settles on the current crisis, China will be in a much stronger position in a very large and important country like Iran. There have been very credible reports of the satellite intelligence that the Chinese have provided. I mean, I think really it's quite extraordinary that this TE-001 satellite giving half-meter resolution is made available at a cost of $36 million to the Iranian Air Force to do precision targeting of US military bases, of Gulf oil assets, to a point of precision that in Qatar, for example, when they struck the Ras Laffan gas facility, of the 14 trains at that facility, they only took out number 2 and number 6, which are owned by Exxon. And so you can kind of see what's going on. So I think the Iranians, if this government survives, this regime survives, which I think it will, they will be much more beholden to the Chinese than previously. On your point, Rajdeep, about us in India in West Asia, I would say maybe 3 things. One, over the last 14 years, starting with Prime Minister Modi's visit to Abu Dhabi in August 2015, we genuinely have reset our relations with the Gulf states. Prime Minister Modi has visited UAE 7 times. It's a remarkable investment in a country which is strategic and important from our perspective. And today, if you ask Dr. Jaishankar or somebody, he would say it is probably one of our 5 most consequential relationships. So that's quite a turnaround. And similarly, in Oman, we have access to our Navy has access to the port at Duqm. We have very good relations with the Saudis and so on. Having done that, I think I will take away nothing from the strategic benefits that Israel offers to India. I think there's technology that they have offered, there is hardware, there's intelligence that they've offered, from Kargil all the way to Op Sindoor, and that matters to us. But at some point, we should also see the growing ostracization of Israel because of its actions towards the Palestinians in Lebanon, in Syria, and in the Gulf. So what I pick up from my friends in the Gulf is a degree of disquiet and conversations that which is the bigger long-term threat to us, an unstable Iran or a belligerent and expansionist Israel. And those are also real conversations, particularly after Qatar was hit by Israel last year in June. And so the Gulf countries today find themselves in a real dilemma. For us, I think we should, even as we look at the benefits we get from Israel, we should also start a ledger on the costs of the exceptional proximity that we have established with Israel. The fact that we are not, as Raja said, balanced anymore, and we have clearly shown a tilt towards one power in the region at the expense of not only not saying a word about the blatant violation of international law when Israel and US attacked Iran, but also in not following basic courtesies of expressing a message of condolence on Khamenei's killing, etc., all of those things that happened. I think we have now eroded that autonomy that we so cherish by aligning ourselves too much with one side. And I think so we need to start thinking of some degree of pullback and reset where we do take a more balanced position. I'm actually arguing that you cannot wish Iran away. It will remain a dominant power. It's a 5,000 years old civilization. It's got geography on its side. It's got resources on its side. And if it successfully withstands this superpower assault, it will emerge as a more consequential player in the region. We can't, go tilt so far away to one side.
This could be a trigger point for a TV debate, which we are going to avoid to whatever extent we can. But you want a quick word on that, because it is a difficult choice to make at the moment for India.
No, all I'm saying is the government has made the choice. I think that's the big thing. Like if you go back to Soviet...
Strategic silence is a choice?
No, if you see, for example, despite all the criticism, the External Affairs Minister, in his parliamentary statement, a full few days after all the initial events, did not condemn either US or Israel, did not express sympathy for the killing of the head of state. So it's a choice. No, all I'm saying, as a realist, to observe things, you got to recognize a fundamental shift in policy that has taken place. The Congress party doesn't like it. The BJP flaunts it. That's the reality. All I'm saying is, but I'll give you one example. Our support to Soviet Union, when Soviet Union intervened in Afghanistan, in Hungary, in Czechoslovakia, were they costs? Of course they were costs. But you made a choice that the benefits of standing with a friend or a partner are more valuable than the costs which you have to absorb. So that's what governments do, and I think they seem to have taken a similar decision.
Yeah, go ahead.
One quick thing on China as well. I mean, in addition to the satellite imagery, the Houthis have been able to shoot down Reaper drones. That cannot be done without Chinese technology. So the China is very much present all over the place and all of the choke points. And to a large extent, the way I see it, the Americans are trying to counter their presence in many of these choke points. So this is all part of a grand war between the two of them.
Can I push you, though, Neelkanth, on growth? We are in Mumbai, and most people want to know, how, if this plays on for much longer, how much will growth be affected? The IMF projects global growth slowing down to 3.1 in 26-27. India, it seems to suggest, is broadly insulated from any major dip. How do you see growth playing out? Do you believe the emerging markets will take a bigger hit, particularly in the short run, with inflationary pressures, with pressures on fiscal balances on their debt? And there will be a widening gap between countries like China, which are in a far better place perhaps to absorb the shock of the West Asia war than a country like India.
I disagree with the last characterization, but let's do the quantification. So even as we speak, till last weekend, on all my channel checks on from various sort of industries, the Indian economy was firing on all cylinders. So there have been pockets where there are weaknesses, but because, as I said, the plastic furniture manufacturing is slowed, tiles manufacturing is slowed, because of that some infrastructure projects are stuck. But cement volume is very strong. Auto sales, now there are waiting periods of 1 to 3 months. So all of this suggests that, credit demand is still very strong. And so all of this suggests that the Indian economy entered this crisis at a very strong momentum. And that's part of the reason why I think the IMF didn't downgrade it by much. If this lasts, because see, I think everyone, even including IMF, including every forecaster, they assume that this ends by end of April. If it does not, if it lasts for 1 year, if say oil prices are at say $100 a barrel, the math is very clear. There is a 2% of GDP impact. It's a one-time, what we call terms of trade shock. Basically, you are paying, and I'm including fertilizer, edible oil, gas, and everything in that. So $80 billion extra you're paying, which is about 2% of GDP. So you're paying $80 billion to someone outside. You're not paying it for internal goods and services. So that's your decline in GDP. The fiscal intervention will cushion that impact. So countries that do not have the fiscal space, so a Sri Lanka or a Bangladesh or a Pakistan or East Africa or maybe some Southeast Asian countries, they will get affected a lot more. But cushioning will only postpone the pain, so or sort of spread it out over a longer period. But it's a one-time impact. It's a one-time impact on inflation. It's a one-time impact on growth, and possibly some correction on the currency. But beyond that, I think the underlying growth momentum, with all the things that are happening in terms of low cost of capital, all the reforms that are happening, the real estate cycle is on the upturn. I think the Indian economy should be quite okay once the oil shock is weathered.
Which brings me to the central point, which is how long, Mr. Suri, do you expect this to go on? We've gone through a period where in June last year, there were attacks on Iran's nuclear installations. Donald Trump tells the world that we've decimated Iran's nuclear infrastructure. 9 months later, where we find these countries at war again. It almost seems, as I said at the very outset, uncertainty is being weaponized. Do you believe that a permanent solution is at all possible? The specifics that we spoke about, is it possible for the United States, virtually at gunpoint, or to put the Iranians in a situation where they completely accept the American terms? Is that at all possible, given that they also have leverage over the Strait of Hormuz?
You know, the uncertainty is not only being weaponized, it's also being monetized. And we are seeing plenty of examples of that as well. Look, I don't see the Iranians making unilateral concessions. I really think that the Americans will have to find ways and methods and language that enables some kind of a climb down from their maximalist position. I think if I were an American negotiator, if I were J.D. Vance or part of somebody from his team, I'd be tearing my hair every time I see a post from Trump, because that means, again, my job has been made exponentially harder as a negotiator because somebody's almost trying to preempt my negotiating position. How do you negotiate when you've got a loose cannon firing off every few hours? So how does a negotiator say, but that's not my position, right? So you know, all of this, and this, the problem is not just at the American end, but also at the Iranian end, where, you know, as Raja said, you know, the grief is still there. The sense of distrust and betrayal of being bombed in the middle of negotiation, not once but twice over, is still there. And many of the influential, pragmatic leaders have been killed. So today you have harder positions in Tehran than probably you did before the 28th of February. So all of that, unfortunately, does not lead me in the direction of optimism. I think that this could still take several weeks. You could have ceasefire and another ceasefire and a messy process of negotiation. The only thing I would say, it reminds me of, you know, when you talk about whose side is time on, right? The Taliban used to have this saying to the Americans that you have the fancy watches, but I have the time, right? I think the Iranians probably think that with the midterm election schedule running, the clock running on that, they have the time, and if they have the ability to withstand pain, which they have demonstrated, I think the Americans are still looking for that one silver bullet. Was it the blockade? I don't think so. Is it bombing? I don't think so. Is it decapitation? Hasn't happened. So what's that silver bullet that they're looking for, which will force a capitulation of Iran? I don't see it on the horizon.
Raja, do you therefore see a belligerent and expansionist Israel on one side, and an increasingly unstable and chaotic and extreme Iran on the other, creating a sense of perpetual uncertainty, which then, to take Neelkanth's point, puts us constantly on edge? You know, you can forget about IMF and World Bank and forecasters, but just puts anyone handling the Indian economy constantly on edge.
Look, I think, but that's been the story of the last 47 years. If you take back to 1979, the Islamic Revolution of Iran, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and the attack on the Great Mosque in Mecca.
Yeah, but it didn't. But it didn't have that kind of impact on India and its economy.
But that's when it starts. The second oil price shock, 1979. but it was cushioned by your export of labor and your remittances. Second oil price hike, the Gulf War, remember when our economy went broke, 1990, was actually pushed by what happened in the Gulf, Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait. So if you look at the last 40 years, the region has been racked by war, continuous conflict of variety of kinds, and where we've seen the American role progressively increase from being a mere offshore presence. Today, they're deeply drawn into the continental thing. Now, will this change? I mean, there are two ways of thinking about it. One, if they can get a deal with Iran, I think the geopolitics of the region will change. Two, even if they don't get a deal, the Gulf countries are going to turn to the Americans even more. Today, if Lebanon peace holds, they're talking about another country joining the Abraham Accords. So Israel's strategy is to win as many Arab countries as possible onto its side. While Iran doesn't have friends in the Arab world. It has proxies. It has the Hezbollah, it has the Hamas, it has the Houthis. But no single Arab leader is willing to stand with them, because what Iran is saying is that, look, I want to redo the region in my image. I want to export the Islamic revolution, which no Arab country is willing to accept. So I think I'll just add one caveat. Look, we must stop thinking of Iran as a single entity. I mean, not in as territorially. If you see, there were three liberal presidents. You had Rafsanjani, you had Khatami, you had Rouhani, all trying to cut a deal with the Americans, all trying to reconcile with the Arab neighbors. But you have the hardline faction which says the Quds Force, the IRGC, no, we got to keep up the revolutionary project. So they have internal argument as well. So the hope, the X factor is, can you win over some liberal sections within Iran and construct a framework in which Iran can regain its standing, oil markets can flourish, and the region can construct a new security architecture. That looks like a dream.
And that's not going to happen in the short term, which is what, Neelkanth should probably concern us. I mean, when you look at the last 5 years itself, you had the COVID shocks, you had a war in Ukraine in the heart of Europe, and now you've had a war that doesn't show any immediate signs of ending in West Asia, or certainly the continuing turbulence. What scars does that leave on the Indian economy, given the fact that we've had a fair degree of macroeconomic stability, given the fact that the headline just 3 months ago was that this was India's Goldilocks moment and all these reforms were being pushed through? Do you believe that those reforms get pushed more aggressively, or do we hold to just wait and see how the world is playing out around us?
No, I do think that the reforms get pushed more aggressively, because we only reform when we have our backs to the wall. There's a statement that I heard the Singapore president make, that India's tragedy is its large size and its glorious history. And we were kind of wondering, there were 5, 6 of us in the room, and we were wondering, why are you saying so? And he said, that's why you don't change. So change only happens when you have your backs to the wall, and I do think that reforms will happen. But I think, from day one of this conflict, I have been writing that markets are a participant in this war. And the markets, because of all the crises that you said, like in COVID, anyone who sold in that panic is regretting it. Anyone who bought in that panic has really made a ton of money. So the conditioning, Pavlovian conditioning, is that by the dip, this will end. And I think that is where Trump is managing it so well so far. But at a time when I think the PMI, the Purchase Managers Index, and some of the indicators are starting to slow, there is no panic button yet. But the moment, maybe in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the inventories run to a level where the panic buttons are starting to get pressed, that's when the concessions on the American side will start happening.